Great. All right. Looks like we're finally ready to go. Morning, everybody. My name is Sheldon Silvermans. This is Hacking Your Way to Good Eats on the Road. One quick thing, standard disclaimer, as is given at most talks, my views represent nobody but myself, not my employer, not anybody else. Do with it as you may at your own risk. I don't think there's kind of anything really that's going to get you into trouble here, but might as well give the standard disclaimer. So, jumping right into it, why on earth would you want to make life a little bit more difficult for yourself and try to upend the way most people go about getting food on the road? There's a couple of major reasons why, I think. First is quality. If you are a foodie, by your own definition, whatever that may be, if you just don't like getting whatever random fast food you run into, this is a way to control that and get something that's going to be better. Second reason is control. Whether it's a dietary restriction or anything else. For me personally, keeping kosher, because I do keep kosher, that was a major motivation for me to kind of delve into things and find alternative ways to get something that was better than, let's say, a power bar and a Red Bull. Going to Vegas for a week, if you're stuck in and around a hotel, you're going to want to kind of mix it up a little bit at least. Another reason is savings. Not necessarily the most major thing, but if you're eating out, if you forego, let's say, fast food and are going to a nicer restaurant, that's going to start to add up real quick if you're on vacation. So you can get that quality, but you're going to sacrifice something in terms of the cost. And the last one is convenience. And although it's going to depend on the individual, but I believe if I'm on a vacation or at a conference or something, I don't necessarily want to drag out to somewhere off-site if at the end of the day or in the middle of the day in between sessions. I'd like the ability to run back somewhere quickly, grab a bite, have it be something that I would actually enjoy, and then move on with my day. So, in terms of what we're going to do and how we're going to accomplish it, first thing to do, like in any situation, is think ahead. First question is, what can I bring with me? If you're flying, obviously you need things that are TSA friendly. Thinking about things that are as simple as, let's take a pouch of tuna fish versus a can of tuna fish. That solves a couple of different problems. One is we don't need to bring necessarily a can opener. The other thing is, I don't believe it's going to be a problem in terms of liquids and bringing that through TSA. So just kind of thinking about things in general like that can help you along. If you are traveling and you have to go, and you're taking a flight, you have to go through TSA, maybe you might want to consider replacing the couple ounces that you have that's normally reserved for things like shampoo with sriracha or a barbecue sauce or something like that. Take those same little bottles, put something in there that you can use to augment whatever else you're bringing, and you can really improve something that may have been, even if you're buying it from a normal source, bring up a little bit of flavor, bring spices and anything else. Might also want to bring some camping items. Traditionally used for camping, they pack up small, they're light, they'll fit in there. As long as you're not dealing with, some knives or anything, should be able to bring that, again, on a plane without a problem. What can't you bring with you? Okay, it's going to be a lot. In any situation, you can't bring your entire kitchen with you, but even just knowing what things you're going to be missing can help you along the way and just plan it out ahead of time. When you go to choose where you're going to stay, so I say choose your lodgings wisely. Going ahead and making sure it has a hotel. If you're staying at a hotel, will have a little fridge. That goes a long way. You can actually either bring stuff with you, buy stuff there, keep it long term. They may have other amenities, whether in the room or that you can call up. If you delve a little deeper, you can find out a lot of times there's stuff that you would not necessarily imagine that they'd have in most hotels, that if you just call up and ask, you can get things like microwaves pretty easily at a lot of hotels. And you may want to think about choosing something other than hotel. go Airbnb, not just for a cost savings or anything else, but because, well, most of the time there'll be a kitchen, and that'll be stocked with things like, just condiments and general utensils and other things that you can take advantage of. Another option is ship stuff out ahead of you. Pack it up, ship it to where you're going to be, or just buy stuff on Amazon and have it shipped directly there. That goes for a number of small items, things you might be able to pick up at a convenience store that'll be a little bit more expensive there or a lot more expensive there. Buy it on Amazon. If you got Amazon Prime, have a 2-day ship there. It'll be there ahead of you, and potentially you might even be able to just leave it there and it won't cost that much. Think on your feet once you get on the ground. Hotel amenities, they can be used for a lot of different purposes. You may forget, if you're cooking something that's going to need to be bound up. I don't know, get some floss and use it as twine. Get some shower caps and use them to hold things. Kind of think about it in not just the traditional amenities that they have, but what else they can be used for. There's a lot of stuff that they offer in hotels and in other places you can really take advantage of. Take advantage of the staff. If you catch me after this, I'm happy to go into detail about different things that you can get just by being nice and social engineering your way into an event venue, whether it's a conference venue or a hotel or anything else. They have a back of house, they have a lot of stuff going on, and they are trained to help people. So you can use that tremendously to your advantage. Just think about the social engineering aspect of it a little bit, and it'll take you very far. Also, one thing to keep in mind, a lot of time the back of the house, it's more or less open, not necessarily access is restricted. Coffee shops, bars, if you're doing something, I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Tim Ferriss. Anybody heard of him, know of him? So he has a 4-hour body, 4-hour work week, 4-hour chef. One of the things he does in his 4-hour chef is he has a whole thing on cooking salmon in a hotel sink. So let's say you go to that kind of a situation, you're cooking salmon in a hotel sink, then you got it, you want to get lemon. Okay, go down to the bar. It's not necessarily going to be the most traditional thing that they're asked for, but if you go down to a bar and ask them for a wedge of lemon, they're probably going to oblige. They probably also have a couple other things that you might be able to grab there. Coffee shops as well often have utensils if you don't have utensils. Might be able to scrounge things, just buy whatever's around. Convenience stores, dollar stores, if you're going for longer periods of time, don't want to bring a whole lot of stuff with you, stop by, again, I've done this in Vegas. Instead of loading up my bag with all the stuff I'm going to need for the week, take a cab or rent a car, go to a dollar store for 10, 15 bucks. You can load up on everything you're ever going to need. That's going to be disposable items, etc. So one thing I've tried to do over the past few years is kind of condense everything down into a kit that I could bring along with me and have it be its own self-sufficient thing. It's kind of like, a pen tester's bag of doom or briefcase of doom or whatever backpack of doom you're going to call it. Take the same idea and apply it here. I like to have a separate bag that's self-contained. I want to keep it going back and forth a bit over the years, but now I try to keep it separate from my normal carry-on bag. I don't like to check things at all, but I want to have something that will fit under the seat, that I can put all of the food that I'm going to bring along, if it's dry goods or anything else, and any cooking apparatus or anything else in that one bag. That helps me grab it and go if I need to. It also helps keep it separate if anything spills out or anything like that. In that bag, I don't want to take everything. I want to take the hard to find stuff. If there's going to be particular, probably not going to be able to find special sauces and maybe even something like olive oil, extra virgin olive oil or something like that. You can find salt and pepper, but finding the other stuff is going to be harder, so you might put that in there. Try to make stuff that's shelf stable with that. Smaller versions of tools, even if you're not necessarily going to need it, I've found that I've started to acquire, kind of either travel versions or smaller versions of tools. Not that I'm going to need them in every single situation, but having them there means, okay, it's in my bag. I know I'm not going to have to even worry about it. It's always there. It's always ready to go. One time I spent like an hour and a half in a major casino looking for a corkscrew. And I decided from that point forward, just I'm not going to bother with that anymore. Actually, one thing to keep in mind is something like a corkscrew. You can bring it on an airplane, but you can't bring a standard corkscrew because it has that little blade that acts as the foil cutter. But if you go to a lot of places, like go to a Walgreens, you can find a little collapsible corkscrew that's like $3, I think. Specialty items. If you have, I don't know, particular things, uncommon tools that that you might want to use. I'm going to go into a little bit later on, but the Sous Vide machine, got it sitting over there right now. If anybody's never seen one or wants to know more about it. So like that's something that I'm not gonna buy it there. I'm not gonna find it there. It's just not gonna be there. So that obviously has to go in my bag. So bag I like right now is this guy. It's I think it's like 50, 60 bucks on Amazon, but if you go to Costco, it's 30 bucks. It is it's sitting down there. It is a bag that is about half the height of a normal carry-on bag, and it will actually fit under an airplane seat. So you can carry a lot in there. That is what I like, and that's what I use right now. Some things, just kind of moving on randomly, gaffer's tape. Anybody here know what gaffer's tape is? Anybody use it? Okay. Anybody here know what duct tape is? Probably everybody. Gaffer's tape is basically duct tape, a little more awesome. It's got cloth backing, it'll stick to itself, but it's easily removable. If we're going to try to clutch stuff together, we don't know what we're going to encounter. If I need to affix something to a platform, if I need to do it, keeping that around, keeping some paracord and other stuff around, that's going to help out tremendously as we go along. I mentioned before having a corkscrew. This one's a lot smaller than even a travel one. Just having that around is nice. Can openers. Might not necessarily take canned goods. Knowing I can bring a can opener with me is great. Buy these are military can openers. If everybody is familiar with them or not. They're pretty darn cheap. You can buy a bag of 10 of them for like $5 at a surplus store. Throw them in any bag, keep them around. You'll always be able to open up a can. Not that you're going to need to that often, but keeping it around is a good idea. Sporks. I don't like the traditional sporks. I like this guy. It is made by Canyon River Knife and Tool, I think. That's called the Eat-In tool. They make a larger version that's more the size of a traditional spork, but you can see it's got the normal spork stuff. It's got a bottle opener. It's got some wrenches and some other stuff on there. It has a little carabiner. They're pretty cheap. Clip them onto a bag, throw it in your bag, and you pretty much won't have to worry about some basic utensils as you go. Delving into a little bit more of preparation for some of the obscure stuff, keeping a couple of zip top bags around is really, really handy. Made one thing, want to keep it a little longer, throw in a zip top bag. If you want to mash something up, I don't know, if you make potatoes somehow, want to make mashed potatoes, throw it in there, give it a couple bashes, pipe it out if you cut the corner off. Do a lot of interesting stuff just with the bags themselves, and they'll be useful when we get to sous vide. Can't bring a knife on a plane, but I believe, and I haven't tested it, but I have heard that you can easily bring a lettuce knife. Lettuce knife is all plastic, so it is not metal, and therefore you can bring it along. In addition to the lettuce knife itself, obviously cutting board. I don't like flexible cutting boards. I'd rather buy something like this, which is something you find more in a food service type operation. You can cut it in half and throw it in a bag. It's a nice, stable surface to work off of and do a lot of interesting stuff with. Moving on to the more interesting and less basic things, which I assume is probably more what you're all going to be into. Coffee. I assume everybody here has had their daily caffeine intake, at least to get them going. Getting good coffee on the road can be a little bit annoying. Aeropress, anybody ever heard of the Aerobeam, those flying discs? So the guy who invented that also invented this thing. It is designed for coffee, espresso, tea. You basically put a filter in the bottom here, put your grounds and some water in here, and then you press down on the plunger and it pushes the coffee out into a cup. There are like competitions each year for people who can make the best coffee and the best espresso using these things. You can also use this even if you don't have hot water in a hotel room. You want to make a cup of coffee, may not always have that. You can actually do cold brew. Cold brew coffee is you just take your grounds, put them in the bottom portion here as if you were going to make a traditional cup of coffee, add your water, put it in the fridge for 6-8 hours. You'll actually get coffee out of that. It will be less acidic, and it'll be, for some people, that is the primary purpose why they will go for a cold brew. But it will also be just a simple way and a very compact way, because I think the whole Aeropress will actually fit inside of a mug. So you can carry this whole thing very compactly, and even maybe stick some grounds in the body of it, and get yourself a really good cup of coffee on the go. Sous vide machines. Anybody hear of sous vide machines? Know what they are? Anybody understand the principles involved? No? Okay. Sous vide machines are one of these things that show up frequently on these chef competition shows. It's billed as this really fancy way of cooking meats and vegetables and other things perfectly. The basic idea is this machine just has a little fan that's using to circulate water, and it has a coil that it uses to heat up that water. So it keeps water at a constant temperature. And then you place items in that water, and they will cook to that exact temperature. So you can precisely define exactly where you want to cook an item to. Normally when you're cooking something, you put it in a pan. That pan is getting up well above what the temperature that you're looking to cook something to. So it's kind of, you're putting it on, waiting until enough time has passed so that the inside of a steak has heated up to the right point, and then you'll flip it and heat the other side so it gets all the way to the middle, and then you'll pull it off before it overcooks. With this, you don't have to worry about it. You just put it in and it will cook to that temperature. Sous vide recipes frequently will have the target temperature and a maximum time and a minimum time. And it'll be like, put it in there for at least an hour and not longer than 12 hours. And that's something that I think you can really use to your advantage if we're cooking in a place where we don't have a traditional kitchen. It's right now my preferred method of cooking. So in terms of what the difference is in the items that you cook, so this is from the item that I have here, and the one I like right now is Sancerre. This is on their website. They have kind of meat cooked the traditional way, meat cooked sous vide. So you can see, okay, because we put it on the heat, we have a little bit of a gray band there, and then we have the nice meat in the center. This cooks all the way through. That's great. It's fantastic food, but the cool thing is we don't have to worry about that timing. We don't have to bring it up to temp. You could leave it going the whole day. Now we got to figure out though, how do we get that to a point where I can use it in a room where I don't really have much else? Traditionally, sous vide, what you do is you vacuum seal the food before you put it in there. So if we're going to bother with it, how are we going to deal with that? Well, as sous vide machines have become more mainstream, a lot of people have been playing around with different ways to cook things and avoid using a commercial vacuum sealer or even a home vacuum sealer, which aren't very compact. First thing most people do when they get a sous vide machine is cook eggs. Obviously, you got eggs, you don't need to vacuum seal it, it already is contained in the shell. Throw it in, set the temperature, your egg will be cooked absolutely perfectly every single time. You can leave that in there for a couple hours. If you like eggs, great. That's, you want eggs, egg salad, whatever. That can take you a long distance. You can even potentially start it off in the morning, have a soft-boiled egg, turn up the temperature a little bit, and then get your hard-boiled eggs for lunch. If we're not going to use a commercial vacuum sealer or a home vacuum sealer, we can use water displacement to vacuum seal items that we're going to put into this water bath. All you have to do is take a zip top bag, put your protein in the center, add a little bit of oil or anything just to offset some pockets that might be there, or even don't. Put it into the water. As you put it into the water is going to displace the air. If you bring the lip of the bag down to the water level, you'll actually squeeze out all the air. And you always have, at the top of the bag, a little bit of extra room, so you can seal it up, get something that is maybe not perfectly vacuum sealed, but definitely vacuum sealed enough for our purposes. And then you can leave it in the bath to cook. So this I have used on a number of occasions. I've done big cuts of meat. This past summer, I actually, around DEF CON, wanted to go to Toxic Barbecue, wanted to bring some stuff there. I took a bunch of ribs and I cooked them for 48 hours leading up to the barbecue, grabbed it with me, went out, and it was just there and ready to go. In terms of what you need to actually put on this stuff, this is stupid simple cooking. This is, I think, from America's Test Kitchen or something. They're just doing, I think, salmon with some oil and maybe an herb in there, and that's it. There is nothing else that they're putting in there. When I'm making a roast, I'll put some salt, pepper, maybe one or two other things. I'll throw it in the bag, and it will taste amazing because the meat itself is cooked perfectly. I made ribs. All I did was take the ribs, add a tiny bit of barbecue sauce, throw it in, let it sit for 2 days. Let it sit for 3 days, let it sit for 1 day. You're getting, if you don't have a ton of equipment, you can substitute time and add a little bit of extra time that is not active time. This is all passive. You're setting it up and then just letting it go, and you get some fantastic, fantastic stuff. This doesn't need to be highfalutin stuff. This is something that's easy to accomplish and easy to take with you. One thing that isn't compact, though, is the vessel. They're using one of these polycarbonate things that you'll find in a restaurant or in a big kitchen. It's not really that compact and can't easily bring it on a plane, throw it in the back of a car easily, but can't really bring it on a plane. So what do you do for that? What I've been doing is getting a 5-gallon bucket. Stop by Home Depot, they're like $2-3. If you're staying somewhere, go to any restaurant or kitchen or anything. Everything comes in 5-gallon buckets in commercial settings. I'm sure you could scavenge a 5-gallon bucket, but if you really, really can't, it's $2 or $3 at Home Depot. You can get a lid from Home Depot also and cut a hole in it if you really want to go all out. So that, again, that's knowing ahead of time I'm going to need it, not going to bring it with me, but it's super easy to source once I get on the ground. I've been playing around with trying to find something that I can bring with me. My current thing, and I actually have it in my bag right now, I'm going to be testing it out this weekend, is a camping bucket. This guy is designed to hold water on its own and stand upright. I'm not quite so sure how it's going to work out for me when I try to throw the sous vide machine in it, but this is a situation where I might use a combination of this bucket, which will stand up on its own and will hold the water, along with some gaffer's tape, maybe some twine or something else to affix the sous vide machine so I know it won't tip over, keep it in place, use the bucket, have the water in there. According to everything I've read about it, this bucket can stand up to some pretty high temperatures, and we're not going to hit those high temperatures when we're looking to sous vide items. We're going to actually be at a pretty low temperature. I mentioned earlier, Tim Ferriss has a thing about cooking salmon in a hotel sink, where he does water displacement to seal salmon in a bag, and then uses just the tap water at its highest setting in a hotel bathroom to cook salmon. That's really on the edge. It's going to be the low edge of what you're going to want to cook it to, but this is going 10 degrees, 15 degrees hotter than that. We're not talking about tremendous temperatures, and this stuff is designed to be sanitized by throwing boiling water and bleach in it. So it'll stand up to a fair amount of abuse. I don't know over 24, 48 hours what it'll stand up to, but certainly for 6-8 hours at a time, I think this is probably going to be a pretty good situation. If you're not interested in investing in something like a sous vide machine, sous vide machines right now start at about $150, $200, so it's a little bit of an investment. You get fantastic stuff, both on the road and at home, but it is a little bit of investment. You want to go a little bit of a cheaper route. Pick up a rice maker. Rice makers are super, super cheap. You go to a Walgreens or a CVS or something like that, buy one for 10, 15 bucks. They usually come with a steamer basket that'll sit on top. If you've never used a rice maker, all you gotta do is put rice in the bottom, add some water, push the button, and it's done. You can go ahead, get some frozen vegetables, put them in the steamer basket on top. You'll get a little bit of stuff coming down from the vegetables as they steam. Get that into the rice. You can bring some, sometimes I've brought like a hard salami in my bag. Take a little bit of sauce, some hard salami or something, get some vegetables steaming on the top. You get a whole meal going, and you're out a couple bucks if you decide to leave that rice maker there. But if you don't want to invest in anything else, you can just buy a small enough rice maker, throw it in your bag, bring it along with you, and you can cook a whole bunch of stuff that way. You can't cook things like pastas, but you know, if you wanted to go, again, with super cheap, super simple stuff, it's not necessarily the healthiest, but those boxed rice dishes or side dishes and stuff, anything that's kind of just bring to a boil, you can throw in one of these and it'll cook it and you'll be good to go. If you wanted to go a little bit more traditional, but go very versatile, you can get an induction cooktop. A lot of people are familiar with kind of your standard metal coil little burners, those electric ones. Those electric burners don't necessarily transfer a lot of heat to a pan, makes it a little bit difficult to cook. Getting something like this, which is a little more expensive but not tremendously so, this cooktop is, I think, $40, and it uses magnetic induction to heat up the pan, and it will actually transfer that heat very evenly and very effectively. A lot of high-end restaurants will have very clean setups where they'll have, instead of traditional burners, they'll just have blank countertops, stainless steel countertops, and they'll have a bunch of these that they can reposition, move around. So you can use this and just cook anything that you would in a pan. If you wanted to go a little bit, you know, keep it compact and, you know, keep things pretty small, you can get pans with movable handles, pack that up small. You can cook your standard stuff, your eggs, vegetables, meats, whatever in this thing. But you can also do, if you think about it a little bit more, you know, off the side, you can do things like, I think Harold McGee talks about making pasta, has some weird ways to make pasta. So the way he recommends making pasta is actually putting pasta in the bottom of a pot, adding some water, adding your salt, all while cold, and then bringing it up to a boil. By the time you bring it up to a boil, maybe you'll need to leave it there a minute, but the pasta will have cooked the whole time. So you could do something like take some spaghetti, break it in half, fit it into the pan, fill it up with water until it's about maybe an inch above the pasta, cook it in there, add in some whatever extra stuff you've got, sauces, or just it on its own. Maybe if you want to go weird, add an egg or something in there. You can make a pasta dish just in one pan. Dump it out right onto a plate. You don't have anything else to clean up. So there's a lot of different things that you can do using these materials. A lot of different interesting ways that you can go. Afterwards, after I usually do a trip, I do post-mortem. I'll take a look at what I made, figure out, okay, what was successful, what wasn't, if I was eating with a couple other people, what did you like about that, is there any ideas that you have? That becomes kind of, fairly important just to, not necessarily, keep a detailed record, but just generally know what's going on. Another thing I do is if it's something I'm going to visit a number of times, I'll make a log of the different places I went to, see if there's anything around that's going to be useful in the future, place I visited, place I didn't visit. If there was anything that I was doing research on the area I was going to be ahead of time and I didn't see it, but then when I got inside, oh yeah, maybe I should have stayed across the street because that had whatever, or that was near whatever, make a note of that. A lot of stuff in that same vein isn't necessarily going to be on a map or going to be on a website. So even if I'm not necessarily going to be thinking about it afterwards, sometimes I'll just wander around the area seeing if there's other stuff near there. And with a lot of this stuff, I think, I kind of tried to give a broad overview, but I think the most important thing that you can really take away from this is you can grab these tools, and these are great tools to use, but really the best thing you can do is learn about this stuff. Even if you're not going to put into practice on any given day, there are a lot of great ways to learn about cooking. Actually, the next talk is covering a lot more traditional cooking stuff. This stuff, even if you're not into it as a foodie, there's a lot of entertainment that you can consume that'll backdoor that information in. I'm a huge fan of Alton Brown, if anybody's ever seen him. Like, that is, the way I got into cooking was I was just out of college living in a pretty run-down apartment building in New York, and we had, because it's in New York City, didn't really get much over the air, so the building had a couple of hardwired cable channels. Basic cable was pretty much, I think it was MTV, Comedy Central, and the Food Network. So I ended up watching a lot of Food Network, watching a lot of Alton Brown stuff. His show, Good Eats, is actually entertaining, and I find him to be incredibly fascinating and a real point of access for people like us, because he delves into the science behind it and isn't necessarily focusing on the individual particular recipes. You understand the reasoning behind it, and you're able to, once you go through that, apply the theory the next time you encounter something. Because it's not just, okay, now we're going to add ingredient A, B, C. Once you understand the science involved, you can really, take it one step further. He also has a lot of great books. His first book is basically just applying heat to proteins. So if you want a basic intro to cooking, that's a great place to start. He has a couple other books. These other books at the bottom, those ones are basically chronicling every single episode of his show and every recipe in every one of those shows. It ran for, I think it was
10 years.
I think it was 11 or 12 years and like 14 seasons over those years.
I just saw his live show over in Hershey on Tuesday night.
Sure.
It's fantastic.
Oh yeah.
He did homemade ice cream using a fire extinguisher.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, you could do that. You do that with fire. Although I think he probably wouldn't recommend using a fire extinguisher in a home setting. But there are people who do that with all sorts of